Hello, hello, welcome to another episode here. Today I have kind of something special here for me. To you, maybe nothing, but to me, I think pretty cool. Today I'm going to be going through an idea of how to implement, how to create, how to host what is possibly one of my favorite animes of all time, and how to run a D&D game inside of it. Or at the very least, how to take the premise of this TV show, this anime, and make it something your own. And of course, as the title here proclaims, we will be looking at how to make an Attack on Titan D&D campaign setting. Let's go ahead and dig right on into it here. So setting, all right, when you are beginning to create this world, when you want to really establish to your players the idea, of what this world is going to be all about, the fear, the isolation, right? The idea that there are, these creatures, these, in this case, we will be using the giants as a replacement for our titans, although if you want to call them titans, feel free. We have to take into account a number of things, right? And setting is the most important part. One of the biggest, draws of the show, one of the biggest players of Attack on Titan is, after all, their setting. The whole point of Attack on Titan wouldn't be there if there wasn't for the setting in which it exists in. So, how do we replicate this? First off, what I would recommend, and of course I'm going to specify this right now, that everything I'm about to say is what I would do. Right? That doesn't necessarily mean it's the best idea, doesn't necessarily mean it's the only idea. It's just, hey, in my own opinion, I think if I were to run this kind of style of campaign, this is how I would do it. One is I would do this on an isolated island, just as how the anime does it. And the reason why is because, and this is one of those things where, if before you start to think to yourself like, wow, I feel like I'm just kind of, being cheap here by just literally ripping off a whole bunch of things off of the TV show, off of the anime. Keep in mind here, the biggest part, one of the biggest, gifts, I think, when it comes to running D&D is realizing that you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Alright, if something is good, and it is memorable, and it is awesome, and it has caused, hundreds of thousands of people around the world to go, holy shit, this is a really, really cool show with a really cool premise, I don't think they would be upset if they went into a D&D campaign and were like, oh, I'm noticing basically copy-pasted similarities. I would fucking love it if I had someone show up and say, hey, have you ever watched Attack on Titan? And I go, yeah. They go, well, I'm running a D&D campaign where it's basically like, it's going to be, you guys are scouts on the wall. I promise I'm going to take it my own direction, but like in terms of setting, we're not going to do like, a Eren Yeager, all right? I promise, like, you're not going to meet, the scouts and shit like that. Like, I promise it's going to be your own story, but the setting is going to be Attack on Titan. I would be fucking in love. I'd be like, hell yes, this is perfect. I love that shit. Like, yes, sold. Like, I would do it 100%. So don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel here. So the things that the show gets right, fucking copy paste that shit. I put that right into your D&D campaign because I promise to try and make it your own and to change up. If you think that you can make this kind of thing happen in, like, say, a really big continent, then go for it. But as I'm kind of going through here, and especially when we get into like the mechanics and stuff, hopefully it'll kind of make sense as to why I'm choosing it the way that I am. So, isolated island. All right, I highly recommend you do an isolated island because it is small, because it is manageable, and because if you are anything like me, then you are someone who likes some realism even in their fucking board game about dragons and elves and dwarves and everything else. And so if you have everything on an island, then because it is isolated, it is easy for you to come up with anything you want as to what is going on off of this island. Now, does that mean something has to be going on outside of this island? Absolutely not. If you want this to literally be the way the show, like, when we all first started watching Attack on Titan, right? We believe that, holy shit, this is the last of humanity. This is it. There ain't nobody else. They are in the three walls. if that's what you want, and you're like, in my world, there is no Marley. There is, like, this is it. This is humanity has been pushed. The humanoid races have been pushed to this point. That is totally fine. All right, that is absolutely, great. You go for it. But by making it an island, if later on you think it'd be really cool if there was something else happening as all of this is going on, just as how it was really epic when we discovered, holy shit, this isn't the last bit of humanity, and all the amazing storytelling and everything that happened after that moment. Just as how it worked in the show, it would work in your D&D campaign. So I do highly, highly recommend that you do an island, because it is small, it is manageable. It would make it so that the landscape makes sense. All right, it means that, hey, everything around here is pretty open, pretty planed. There's a reason that the cities exist where they are, etc., etc. All right, I am a big fan of keeping things small, because small equals controllable. All right, when things are too big, then it may cause your players to have the idea, oh, well, if this is taking place all over the world and we're on this huge ass, giant map, then, as soon as we find the weakness to the giants, or, in this case, our giants, the titans, the whatever you call your enemies here in this world, as soon as we find their weakness, then let's find a landscape, a geographical feature that assists that, and then just get everybody to move there, right? Like, you have to explain a reason why the cities exist where they are, and I think an island would help out with that. Speaking of cities, I personally suggest that there are multiple. All right, this is going to be my first kind of curtail off of the Attack on Titans world. I think that you should have more than one ringed city. If you want, like, say, a super, 3-ringed city, if you want of Paradise, I've heard it been pronounced a couple of times. If you want, the super city where you got, Wall Maria, Wall Cena, Wall Rose, if you want to do that and just have one city, you definitely can. But hear me out for a second. Wouldn't it be cool if you were a player and you knew going in that this was going to be an Attack on Titans themed game? If your DM said, hey, so I got 3 cities. There have been 3 cities that have survived the Titan onslaught of my world. All right. Each one is going to specialize in something. Now, what those things specialize in, that's up to you. All right. Like I said, it creates different areas of interest. So maybe, for instance, and we'll get more into this here in a few slides, but maybe there's something to do with the magic system, and tell your players, hey, if it could be something even, as like a buff. Say, hey, if you choose, city 1, all right, we'll give, obviously you would come up with much better names than this, but to keep it simple here for YouTube's sake, all right, if you choose city 1, then if you start in this city, then you get an extra 1st level spell slot. All right, 2nd level spell slot. Now, that may not sound like a whole lot, but when we get to our game mechanics here that I highly suggest that you adopt, that might be a very big deal for you. All right, versus say, hey, if you start in this other city has been proven that they have, better trade networks, so they have better equipment. So, for instance, if you don't start in this city, the only, whenever we choose a class, right, we get our starting equipment. What if the DM said, yeah, you could start as a fighter and you have to get the absolute most bare bones, like, leather armor, AC 11, no addition to your dexterity, nothing. Because there's only one city that had managed to, keep its trading guild, its merchants, its armor smiths, blacksmiths and whatnot, alive. That's the city they all migrated to, so there's only one city. If you want to start with all the gear that your classes tell you they can start with, you have to start in this city. If you don't start in this city, you get the shittiest gear, and you have to go find it. All right, or you have to go pay for it somewhere. All right, just little things like that, and again, I highly suggest that you come up with better than that. I'm just kind of spitballing some ideas here of just ways to make each city a little different. All right, and I would even do like their geography would be a little bit different. Maybe one city is kind of nestled up to a mountain, so maybe like players literally just it comes down to just as simple as like, hey, I would like it if I got to see more mountain pictures and shit on my Roll20 pages when we're playing online. Like even something as simple as just different geography. Now, don't go anywhere too crazy. All right, try to not have one city that's in the snow-capped mountain range where another city is in the middle of a desert and the other one is an island out in the ocean. Like, I don't suggest that one, just because then at that point, you're really going to get into the whole like, okay, so do these titans, these giants, do they swim? Does cold affect them differently? Like, you'd have to start coming up with a lot of different mechanics to it. The whole point of us choosing an island, right, was so that the environment would be relatively similar wherever it may be. There'd be a little differential, right? We'd have some mountains, we'd have some forests, we'd have some plains, rivers, but, as I said, a lot of it would be similar to each other. Whereas if you really go crazy with this, then you may find yourself very quickly going like, oh shit, I put this place, I told my players the city was surrounded by ice and snow and up on a mountaintop, and now they're wondering why why can't they just keep casting water spells on the walls and making it so the titans just keep sliding off of them. Like, it's like, well shit, if that's all it took, then why haven't they been doing that for years, right? Like, we're trying to keep it easy on us. So, try to change up a little bit of their topography, but overall, I would say, try to keep their geography relatively simple. But whatever the case, try to have huge swaths of open land filled with your enemy type. Now, for me, I think there is a D&D monster that is already in play that I think would fit perfectly for this kind of situation, and that is, of course, the giants. There are, different tiers of giants, monsters of the multiverse. I'm pretty sure they have reinstilled a number of giants that were lost after Volos. So there is a number of different giant creatures. And to be honest, you can even use like troll numbers. Like if you want to just make a couple of like smaller giants, just fucking reskin some trolls and you basically have just smaller versions of titans. You really do. All of that stuff I would use. So I would use giants here. Now I would customize giants, right? I would try my best to have my giants, have my titans as different as possible. All right, so giant types. All right, I would break them up. Now, however many breaks you would want, however many different types you would want, you go for it. It is totally up to you and how many you think you can creatively make. I will say that quality, I think, is better than quantity. So I would suggest not having a stat block for a 3-meter giant versus a 4-meter giant versus a 5-meter giant, 6-meter, 8-meter, 9, like if you end up with like 25 different kinds of titans, right, air quotes, titans, giants, whatever, we're going to call our enemies here, then I think what you're going to end up finding is that very quickly there's only like a +1 difference between 2 or 3 of them, or like 20 to 30 hit points between 2 or 3 of them. And I think you're going to end up just kind of burning yourself out trying to make all these different things. So instead, I would do exactly what the show did, which is that they grouped it as basically like the smallest of giants. The smallest of titans were like 3 to 4 meters. Right, then you had kind of the mid, which was like 6 to 8 meters, and then you had the big boys. Right, you had the 9-meter titans. And then, of course, you have your abnormals. All right, these are your special ones. And, Monsters of the Multiverse, Volos, like, they have come out with different kinds of giants. There's a type of hill giant, even. It's like the Starved or something. It's the hill giant that basically, like, doesn't eat anything. Like, he's not allowed to eat or something. Or, like, he eats other hill giants, like... there's plenty of those, or even, and again, reskinning some trolls can give you some variety, can give you different ideas and different perspectives here, different, varieties when it comes to giving your titans abilities. And I would do so. All right. I would spend more time with those, with creating very unique and cool, your special titans. All right, your abnormals versus trying to come up with, a difference between a 3-meter and a 4-meter and a 4-meter versus a 5-meter and a 5-meter versus 6-meter. Like, I would break it down into like basic groups, give them the stat blocks, call it good. Which for stat blocks, all right, I have here just kind of a very, very basic custom 3 to 4 meter giant, all right, Titan. AC of an 11. All right, we'll compare it here to the smallest of giants, which is the Hill Giant in 5th edition Monsters Manual. In just a second, so I can kind of show you the differences here in the numbers. So armor class 11. If you are a fan of the show, if you have watched Attack on Titan, then you know that for the most part, like, they take hits like bitches, right? Like they don't dodge them out of the way. In fact, that's what usually makes an abnormal Titan, you know, identifiable, right? It's a Titan that can defend itself. It's something that avoids damage. Whereas most Titans are just, you know, I see you, I eat you, num 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 num, and then that's it. So, you know, this Titan, very low AC, all right, pretty easy to hit. Hit points, still a sack of them, because as we've all seen in the TV show, they take damage, right? Like they, you know, they can get hit and keep going. Speed 40 feet. Most of the Titans on the show seem to be relatively quick. If you want to drop that to say 30, because after all, this is supposed to be like the smallest of them. So maybe they are the slowest comparably, because they just don't have the length of their legs. You know, that could definitely take account for it, but for this case, I kept it at 40. There are my stats: my strength, wisdom, con, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. Vulnerable. I would say you need to create a vulnerability for your Titans. I do. Now, what that vulnerability is up to you. All right, if you want to pull the, hey, I loved what they did with the show. I loved how the anime made the, you know, the nape of the neck is the weakness to the Titan. So, you know, maybe you make it, you know, you make your homebrew vulnerability a called shot. Maybe you tell your players, like, hey, just so you know, and maybe this is something that they discover, maybe this is something that they figure out in their first combat with some of these giants, with, you know, maybe they have an NPC, someone who's out hunting these giants, or they're with them and are teaching them something in combat. I would do that versus just telling them. You know, but maybe, you know, they find out that, hey, I can make a called shot, which will decrease, you know, my attack by a certain number. All right. Now, I think, you know, maybe, you know, taking a page out of the Great Weapon Master book or the Sharpshooter feat, maybe you make it a -5 called shot. All right. Like, hey, if you want, you can aim for a particular body part of this Titan, -5. All right, and that's its vulnerability, is a player can say, I am aiming for the weak point. Now, if you are trying to homebrew it a little bit, kind of get away a little from Attack on Titan, so it's kind of your own, maybe you make the weakness, you know, the skull, right? Like, maybe you make it that, like, hey, there is you know, every Titan we have ever fought seems to have a weak point in the back of the skull. You know, the back top of the skull area just seems as if, like, it doesn't develop as hard and as regenerative as the other body parts, so that is its weak point. Or you can just pull directly out of, you know, Attack on Titan and say, yeah, it's the nape of the fucking neck. You know, if you aim for the nape of the neck, you take a -5 penalty to your shot, but if you hit, your damage is doubled. I like that. You know, again, you know, especially considering that, again, we are talking about bags of hit points here. All right, we are talking about the fact that if you know, and you as the DM, you can say, like, hey, you do not have the ability to attack this creature at the nape of the neck. All right, you are, you know, this creature is a large creature, so it is 10 feet, you know, it's 3 to 4 meters, you know, so that means that it is, you know, 9 to 12 feet off the ground. You know, if you're standing, you know, 30 feet in front of it, I'm sorry, you don't get to see the nape of the neck. You don't get to do it. So maneuverability, this is going to be one of the first times, and this is why I love this idea of this campaign. Maneuverability, where you are on the battle map. Now it's not just, oh, I'm going to try to stay out of the creature's range. Now it's, okay, how do I get to be in a location where I can see the nape of this fucking creature? Because otherwise it's going to take us forever to kill it, because it's a giant bag of hit points. So I would do either a called shot as its vulnerability, which I know it sounds kind of weird, right? Because usually when we see vulnerability, it's usually tied to some kind of damage type, you know, fire, acid, whatever. But I really think that it would be cool, and it would stick with the theme of the attack on Titan, right? Is if you make the vulnerability a called shot. If you think -5 is not enough, if you think like, hey, that's a really small target, and -5 doesn't seem like that big of a deal, especially once you get to the point where, you know, certain creatures will have advantage, or certain characters will have advantage. They'll have +9 on their hit. You know, maybe a -5 isn't as big as you think it is. At which point, you know, it's up to you. Make it -6, make it -7, make it, you know, make it -5 and at disadvantage unless you are literally right at the back of that creature. Like, you know, however it moves around, like they have to be directly behind the creature or it is at disadvantage and a -5. It's up to you. But I would personally do that versus, say, a damage type vulnerability. And the reason why I say that is because then the question is if that was true, then why didn't everyone and their dog specialize in that, you know, that damage type, make nothing but weapons and spells and whatever using it, and then just clean house? Right? Like if we, you know, like let's just say here for the sake of this that, you know, this creature, this 3 to 4 meter giant here, let's say that this Titan is vulnerable to fire damage, as is most of the other Titans. If that was true, then literally one party of casters being able to launch Chromatic Orb using fire damage would be able to kill this thing in one round, no matter where they were. And then they could just move on to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And you see where I'm going? Like, it doesn't seem like that would be so tough. So I personally, I would stay away from the elemental vulnerabilities. I would do more of the call shot. Like, there's a weak point on these Titans. If you find it, you take a -5 penalty, and you got to be in a position to use it. But if you do it, you double the damage of your strike. Because after all, if you watch the TV show, it only takes one fucking slice to the back of the neck. It only takes one to kill most of those Titans. So to me, so what if you know, so what if your fighter gets behind it, you know, or your barbarian gets behind it and immediately does 40 points of damage because it you know, at second or third level, because it's technically getting critted on every time, you know, this person does it. I mean, like, to me, that's fine. Like, great. That means this person has the ability to take down this Titan in 2 turns. Like, that's fine. That goes right alongside the TV show as far as I'm concerned. All right, as for attacks, Great Club or Slam. All right, obviously, all right, this could definitely be a Slam attack instead. All right, because after all, in the show, all right, they don't use weapons. So maybe Slam instead. +6 to hit, 10 feet. Target to hit, 2d8 + 4. That is monstrous damage. All right, that is an average of about 14 points of damage on a hit. Now, this is meant to hit hard. This is one of those situations where we as DMs have to accept the fact that we may kill a couple of characters right out of the gate. I'm not saying that to be proud of it. All right, I've said this before in previous episodes, previous videos, that, you know, I'm a DM that, you know, where the dice fall, they fall. You know, if you get into a fight and you have had enough information given to you that, you know, it was a fight that you maybe are not prepared for or is not going your way as you think it might be, if you choose to keep going and keep fighting it, then I'm sorry, but the fate is up to you. You know, I'm not going to feel bad if someone dies because I warned you in my own ways that you needed to get out of there and you didn't. This might be one of those instances, though, where literally if your wizard, if your poor little level 1 wizard is out there in the front and gets hit immediately, like, this could insta-kill them. This attack could literally, if you roll well enough, you could just insta-kill them in one blow. But isn't that what happens in Attack on Titan? Like, you know, isn't that what, you know, like, you got to keep in mind, you remember, these are creatures that have pushed humanity and the other humanoid races to the brink of extinction. There is a reason there are only so many cities left. There is a reason they hide behind walls. It's because in open fights, people tended to lose. So I don't think we should pull back on the damage here. These need to hit hard. Now, if you think 2 of these Slam attacks, Great Club's attacks, are too much, then pull it back to 1. I don't think that would be asking. I don't think that would be, you know, diminishing it too much. Pull it back to 1 attack. And then maybe, maybe that's the difference between, maybe that's the only difference between the 3 and the 4 meter. Is a 3 meter, attacks once, while a 4 meter can attack twice. Maybe that's something you do. But this is just a real rough guesstimate, a rough outline of what my small list 3 to 4 meter Titan looks like. All right, well, what about our 6 to 8 meter then? All right, now this is just for a means of comparison. All right, I'm not going into each and every one of them. I'm only looking at these two, but I'm just kind of showing you here the differences. For my 6 to 8 meter, this one is using almost copy pasted Hill Giant stat block, and I think it fits. All right, we have a higher AC. All right, we have an AC at 13. We have 105 hit points, so much bigger hit point pool. We have our stats. We have a much better perception. All right, so these giants, these titans will actually be able to see. All right, we'll be able to maybe spot our party from a little ways away. Again, vulnerability. All right, whatever you come up with, you need a vulnerability. I do. I personally think you need a vulnerability. I would not skip out on that part. It's why I have that question mark there. It isn't to like, oh, if you want, you can. I think you need a vulnerability. I truly do. Allow your party members, to feel like badasses when they get to a point when in one round they can take down a Titan by themselves. Like, I think that that's cool. All right. I, as a player, I would look forward to that. So I would try to have a vulnerability of some kind, giving that player that ability to do double damage by just hitting it at a certain point. All right. Multi-attack. All right. Once again, we have the Grey Club. You could call it a slam instead. All right. +8. Same feat to reach. This time it is a 3d8 +5. So we're increasing that damage. But it is also here that we are going to use a ranged attack. Now, I know in the anime, the only Titan that actually did range was really the Beast Titan, right? Like, that was his whole thing, was just chucking rocks at shit. However, I do think that bigger giants, bigger Titans, you need to at some point include a ranged weapon. And the reason why that is because, again, we're in a context of, okay, at some point in our world, we had the ability to cast really powerful magic, right? Like, there's a reason magic still exists. There's a reason why, your players are going to be able to use longbows and short bows and have plate armor and, cast fireballs from 300 feet, yada, yada, yada. If none of your Titans have range of any kind, then it begs the question, well, then why didn't the humanoid races, why didn't they just create like a really shitty, like 4 foot, 5, 6 feet tall wall so that giants would come in and hit the wall and then just pepper them from a distance for just days, weeks, months? Like, why didn't they just keep their distance then and finish it? And the reason is because once you get giants that are bigger than 3 to 4 meters, now we have ones that have range to them. This is how come. And this range is nothing to be, 60 feet is good. All right. Most battle maps are usually only like, 90, 100 feet wide. So, you put this thing in the middle and it can hit just about anywhere it wants on that battle map. And it has disadvantage to range out to 240 feet. That is, that is exactly what we want, right? Like, this to me is this is a great stat for a ranged weapon from our giants, from our Titans. Now, for its damage, it hits hard, right? Like, that's the thing, is it does 3d10 +5. Now, this is something that I would maybe, as a DM, I would make a rule in my head that it only uses range if no one is within melee distance. As soon as someone is within, say, 40 feet, because that's how far this giant, well, technically 50 feet because it has a 10-foot reach. If people stay outside of 50 feet, then this Titan has the ability to use its ranged weapon. It is intelligent enough to know that none of you are close enough to me, so I'm just going to grab giant chunks of earth and hurl it at you. But as soon as someone is within 50 feet, maybe, and this is something that, again, maybe there's like an NPC, a guide, a teacher, someone who's kind of helping the party out at the beginning, who's like, yeah, there's just something about, the smell of humanity. As soon as someone gets within a certain distance here, these fuckers, they just seem to go mad, and they just lose any sense of where they are, and they just go after you like a rabid animal, which is just a way of saying that, hey, as soon as you're within 50 feet, it stops using its range. I, the DM, am locking its range ability off, because 3d10 plus 5 is a lot of fucking damage. This is a CR5 creature, after all. So, I don't want to shy away from it. I want these attacks and these bonuses. I want these things to still be here, because after all, they are, this is meant to scare people. There is a reason humanoids are hiding behind walls. There's a reason for it. So you should give them something, that really kind of shows that, like, hey, there's a reason why people have had to hide behind them instead of just like, taking pot shots at, from a distance. All right, game mechanics. All right, and this is gonna be the last thing that we talk about here. All right, because I want to leave as much up to you as possible. So game mechanics. How would this game work mechanically? All right, we have the setting down. We have our island. We have our isolated cities. All right, we try to create a little bit of differences between them so that the players kind of feel like each one's unique. How are we going to make them different, right? How is it going to work? What are we going to do to make this really feel like it feels like how I want the Attack on Titan game to feel? First off, survival needs to matter. Humans have not lived outside of the walls for a long time. How long is up to you? Is there trading between the cities? If so, in my world, I'm imagining this in my own game. If I was running this, and I would go with maybe 3 cities. All right, I like the idea of 3 cities. 3 cities, one of them is the biggest, all right, and it maybe even has like the 3 rings around it. In fact, to be honest, I would probably, just to really kind of hit the member berries of my party members, my anime lovers, I would probably even call them, Wall Maria, Wall Rose, and Wall Cena, in all honesty. But let's go ahead, but if I had like trading between the cities, and I would have trading done between the cities, that I would have everything on horseback. The trading would be done in very small, like 4 to 5 man party. The only thing would be, the only things that would be traded would be things that can fit, in saddlebags of a horse. Every trade would be weighed to the ounce, because the horses need to be able to travel fast enough to avoid hurling rocks and stone and the 40 feet movement speed of these titans. So every package is weighed to the gram, right? That's how I would do it. And so because of this, survival needs to matter. When your party steps foot outside of its starting city, then you as the DM, and you need to tell them this, session 0, water, food, these things are going to matter. All right, and because as soon as you say this to a party, you're gonna have 1 if not 2 party members go immediately like, holy shit. So we're gonna have big heavy thing that hits hard, has weak point at back of neck. I'm gonna keep my fucking distance. I'm going rogue. All right, I'm going ranger. All right, and I'm taking the wanderer background, right? Like, someone's gonna do it, right? Someone's gonna end up picking a ranger here. You need to tell that ranger that, okay, I'm going to give you a bonus, or I'm going to give you an advantage on a survival check to hunt for food or something. But I know that it says, I think it's in the Wanderer feat, and I think even the Ranger class says something like the Natural Explorer or whatever, where it's like, hey, you'll always be able to find food. You'll always, like if you spend an hour out in the wilderness, you'll always be able to, provide enough food for a party of 4 members for 24 hours or like some shit like that, right? No, they don't. No, they don't. Not in this game, they don't. All right. In fact, I would even go so far as I would take the Wanderer background out of the list. I'm pretty sure that's the one. It's either the Hermit or the Wanderer, the one that can find food easily. I would kick that one off the list completely and say, yeah, there is no Wanderer background. And then secondly, if you do pick a Ranger, all right, I would replace it with something else. But I would not give them that benefit of, hey, you will always be, because this is what part of this game is supposed to be. Okay? Now, to make it fair, all right, I would come up with something good. All right, you know, and Tasha's actually, I think Tasha's actually gives you the option where it's like, hey, you can either do natural explore or something else. All right, pick that one. All right, you know, just give them, you know, tell them, hey, if you pick ranger, you don't have a choice. You do not get to have the find food wherever you are, whatever, because we want these things to matter. All right, sleeping in safety. This needs to matter. All right, guess what? Setting your watch isn't enough. All right, and this is the one time where, and I'm usually kind of, you know, on the fence when it comes to things like wandering monster tables and stuff. I just am usually kind of the opinion that whenever we talk about, you know, like the wandering monster tables and you know, certain, I'm trying to think how best to put it. I don't like when we try fucking with the players during their rest most of the time, because it's like, you know, it's like, okay, DM, if you want to have another, you know, combat encounter, just have another combat encounter. Why are you doing it when, like, we're trying, like, you know, like the players are done with the day, they're trying to get done with the day, they want to move on the next day because they have shit they want to do, and you're just like stopping it by trying to throw a combat encounter. Like, that's usually how I feel like most of you know, random encounter tables during rest go. But this is the time where I say, no, you need to prove that outside the walls is dangerous. So how would I do it? I would have I would personally have it as, you know, kind of a little table for myself where I would say, okay, where are the players? Where did they set up camp? If they are outside the city, where did they, you know, and this is why, like, location is going to matter. If my players tell me that, yeah, we just kind of set up camp, just kind of like right here out in the middle of the plains, we have a little campfire, we kick our shit, like whatever, then you can bet your ass that, like, that is like 75% chance that something is coming in and trying to eat you in the middle of the night. Okay, because, like, you are out in the open, you have had food, you have open flame, like, I would do everything. Okay, I'd still give them a small chance to succeed. So maybe, you know, that one, you know, it's a simple D20 roll. And on a 1 through 15, something ends up showing up in the middle of the night. And it's going to come down to their watches, to their perception checks as to whether or not that thing gets a surprise round or not. But if the players say, hey, we find a grove of trees, we try to use like mud and sticks, and we try to, like, you know, cover up our trail, our scents, you know, we have no open flames, we're doing everything by moonlight, then it's like, then I would decrease it. All right, I would decrease it to a point. I would probably have, like, say, you know, maybe a 1 through 5 something happens, or a 1 through 3 something happens, and then everything else, you know, their watch goes unimpeded. And then from there, you then have another little random encounter table where it's like, okay, how many Titans show up? Or some other creature. You know, you know, I know in Attack on Titans, you know, the Titans basically ignore, like, livestock and things like that. And so, you know, maybe in your world, you know, and this is something that Attack on Titans didn't really show. Like, if Titans don't kill people, or sorry, they kill a lot of fucking people. If Titans don't kill animals, if all they do is just kill people, then, like, why the fuck isn't, you know, the entire wilderness outside Wall, you know, Maria, just absolutely filled with bears? You know, why haven't the natural predators just absolutely multiplied by 1,000,000, you know, after the, you know, almost extinction of the human race? You know, that kind of shit. So maybe, you know, yeah, so, you know, don't think the Titans have to be the only thing that fuck with your party. You know, don't think your random encounter tables just have to be different types of Titans. Like, you know, odds are if the Titans aren't attacking anything else, they're just attacking people, maybe there's a reason for it. However, I will say, if you do end up doing something like that, then you need to also have a very good reason as to why there aren't just a shit ton of druids chilling out there in the wilderness. Anytime a Titan comes, they just turn into a fucking bear, you know, or a squirrel, and the Titan just walks on by, and then they go back. Like, you know, you're going to have a couple of explanations for why this is happening. But the point I'm trying to make is that, you know, really create that feeling of, hey, we are not in a city. We are not safe here. You know, if shit goes down, we are in trouble. You know, we are not in the safety of a walled place. Think of gear. All right, you know, if you create a world, if you are copying off of Attack on Titans directly, and you're like, yeah, it's the nape of the neck. Okay, well, if a giant Titan is 9 meters tall, then that means it is 27 feet off the ground. How is a melee combatant able to get up there and hit the neck? You know, because that means that, barbarian getting, in the square, thinking on a battle map, a barbarian getting on the square right behind the Titan, that doesn't mean it gets its vulnerability, because it has to go 20 feet fucking up, right? So maybe in this world, they have created some kind of, what is it called? The ODM gear. And don't be afraid to give those to the party early, but give it to them with the same kind of stipulation. Now, I don't have any custom homebrew one here for you, but I would do something with it where it's like, hey, it can latch on to a target such as a tree or a Titan. It auto latches, it successfully hits. I would not have it roll to hit, to be honest, because that just sounds like a whole lot of rolling just for a fighter to get in a position to do something, which I don't think would be very fun. So I would say, it can pull you up, upwards of, 20 feet, 15, 20 feet, which should get you into a position where you can find the nape of the neck on the thing. But then put a limit on it. Be like, yeah, you can only use, an ODM gear, 5 times. And every time you use it, you gotta fucking, you're putting a check mark on it. And as soon as it has 5 check marks, fucking you rip that, that note card up. And use the DM if you're, fortunate enough to play this in person. Alright, maybe you literally just have a stack of like 100 something note cards of just empty ODM gear. And so as soon as it has, as soon as a player rips up their first one, they have to go back, buy another one, or find another one, and you hand them the new one. Or something along that line. Now, 5 might be really small, right? Maybe you can go up to like, say, 10 or 15 or 20, like whatever, excuse me, whatever number you're comfortable with. But that is how I would do it. All right, magic. Again, why isn't it, for how much magic solves so many problems here in 5th edition, we have to ask the question then, well, why didn't magic solve all of these problems? Why didn't we just banish a shit ton of these guys, right? Like, why haven't we just been hurling fireballs from 300 feet away, doing just massive amounts of damage? Why haven't we been, hasting our warriors and causing them to just kill everybody? Like, why is it that, magic could not solve these problems? And for that, I say that you need to create some kind of solution and explanation for why magic is weird or not as effective outside of the cities. All right, you need to create a system where magic coordinates with the location of the cities. Here's what I mean by that. If I was running this campaign, if this was my world that I was making, I would make it in my world that when my players, like there's the 3 cities, I'll word it like this. The reason the 3 cities exist where they do isn't just because of natural resources. They also exist where they do because of magical resources. They were built. The reason these 3 cities were chosen as the cities, the last vestiges of the humanoid races, were because these 3 cities are where the magical ley lines that got shredded when the Titans showed up in the material world and began just destroying everything else. The magic receded everywhere else in the world but in these 3 cities. All right? That's a lot of words. That's a lot of flavor text. Well, what the fuck do you mean by that there, TLC? Here's what I mean. If you rest anywhere else that is not inside the walls of a city, if you are a caster, you receive 0 long rest benefits in terms of your spell slots. You get none of your spell slots back. That's what I mean. Because as soon as you step outside of these walls, you are going too far away of those magical ley lines or wells or rifts or portals, whatever you want to call them. Point is that you are too far away from them now. So when you rest, so in other words, if you're a spellcaster, if you go out into the wilderness, You are acknowledging that there is you have a finite resource. There is something that, the thing that makes you so awesome is limited. Which means, no, you don't just get to climb up a tree and start chucking fireballs from 300 feet away, 300 feet away, and expect everything to go fine, because as soon as you're out of those spell slots, you don't get it back. Now, is that pretty severe? Absolutely. Would that make it so that no one would want to play spellcaster in this world? Probably. So in order to rescind that, you got, it would come down to, what are the players wanting to do? If you have a player that's like, hey, that seems really harsh and I was really hoping I get to play a spellcaster in this world, okay, we can try to come up with something different, right? Like, we can. Okay, we absolutely can. We can try to come up with something like, say, maybe, maybe, all right, maybe instead of like ley lines or something ethereal, something invisible, maybe it's something physical. Maybe the magic in your world, in this particular world, stems from giant meteors that crashed into Earth, however many years ago, and there's only 3 of these meteors left, and it's around these 3 meteors or meteor crash sites where these cities were formed, right? And it's from there that we get the source of the magic that the humanoid races use, right? That druids get to use, that sorcerers use, wizards use, yada, yada, yada. Bards use, etc. So if you are someone who has been tasked with going outside of the walls, then you can find, either on the black market or, maybe given to you by, the military or something, a amulet that is actually a chunk of that meteor or that crystal or, whatever source you want to use here. And as long as you have that on you, then maybe you regain half of your spell slots, right? Like, maybe it's like, hey, you regain spell slots equal to, your level. All right, so if I'm a 5th level wizard and I go outside the walls, then I can regain 5 levels worth of spell slots, which means I may only regain, which means I have to choose either, 3 first level spell slots and 1 second level spell slot, or 1 third and 1 second, and then all the rest of my spells are just going to be cantrips, that I get to use. And that is something I would say. I would say, cantrips are, they act the same way as, as they do in normal games, right? Like, there is no limit to them. I would let my spellcasters use cantrips as much as they want. But yeah, I would do something along that line. Congratulations, I have accidentally created a game where every spellcaster would want to be a fucking warlock. Like, that's all you'll see. You will find rangers, you will find maybe a couple of barbarians, and you will find warlocks. And that's it. There's going to be the 3 common classes in this game. But I think that'd be really cool. I think that, bottom line is you need to do something with the magical system. Because if especially because, and this is something else, if we're going to care about things like food and water and sleep and safety, carry weight. How much are you carrying? That is something I didn't put on my list here, but I should have. All right, carry weight is going to be up here. How many arrows do you have? Do you know how much arrows weigh? Do you know how clunky, how bulky a quiver of 50 arrows is? How many do you think you'll actually be able to carry and still be maneuverable? If we're going to put those kinds of stipulations on melee classes, range classes, then we need to do something with casters as well. So I would create some kind of system that, and again, it would depend on who's showing up. And I would ask the players like, hey, I haven't fully decided yet how I'm going to nerf spellcasters, but I'm going to nerf spellcasters. Who here has already decided, like, no matter what happens, I am playing a spellcaster in my world? If no one raises their hand, if everyone's like, oh no, I'm playing rogue, I'm going to play ranger, I'm doing like whatever. If you end up with basically no spellcaster, then congratulations, you don't have to really worry about it. But if you have a party with someone like me, who's like, well, we gotta have a healer. If we're going out in the fucking wilderness, like, surrounded by deadly shit, like, we gotta have a healer in the party, right? Like, I'm gonna be the healer. Then at that point, think about how you can make it both fair so that person doesn't feel like, yep, great, I cast my 1 spell, I have nothing I can do now the rest of the day except use cantrips. Like, try to come up with a way that's fair, but is just as constricting and resource managing as you are having your range units, your rangers, your rogues, your fighters, just as how they're having to be focusing on the ammo and things that they use. Whatever you do, basically make surviving outside the cities something to fear. Make it a reason that people live behind the walls of these cities. All right, if it was easy, all right, if it was cheap, if I could walk outside the cities and cast just as many spells all the time and not have to worry about anything, then why aren't people doing it? There has to be a reason, right? So make surviving outside the cities something to fear. However that looks to you is up to you. Now, as for any plot ideas, plot tricks, personally, I would avoid the whole idea of, the concept of have basically retelling of Attack on Titan. I would avoid that. All right, I would do my own thing as much as I could, but having a very, maybe the very, I would not shy away. I would, in fact, the very first sighting, the very first time my players ever meet an abnormal Titan, all right, one of these special Titans, would be when that Titan is knocking down a fucking wall. I think that, it was iconic in the show for a reason. Right? The symbology of it, right? The symbolism that, this cradle, this sense of security and safety has just been destroyed. There is a reason that is so powerful and such a huge, momentous occasion of episode fucking 1, right? Like, it's a thing we all remember from watching the show, and it's there for a reason. Now, would I do that in session 1 for your party? Maybe, if that's how you want session 1 to end. All right, have session 1 be like the players kind of meet the party. They go off on like a little 3-meter Titan hunt because a sighting of a 3-meter had been found a while ago, and so they're off in the party, looking for it. And then they get back, and right as the session is ending, the party hears as loud, thunderous footsteps come. You see the head of a Titan looming over the wall just in time as, a sound of a thunderclap comes and a giant crack goes all the way up and down the wall and the debris starts flying from down below. End session, see you next week. Like, that sounds fucking epic to me. I'd be all about it. Anyway, this is how I would do an Attack on Titan game. I really want to play it now, to be honest. This sounds fucking rad. If you liked it, if you enjoyed it, leave a like, leave a comment. But whatever the case, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will catch you next time.